I have not been so stressed out for a televised drag competition in a long time. Maybe the last time would have been sometime around Dragula Titans, just worried about if Victoria Elizabeth Black was going to be eliminated or was going to end up winning the whole thing. This week genuinely got my anxiety running, but I am so happy with the outcome and who the top three are. Hi, hello everyone, my name is Jer, and we are talking about King of Drag episode 5, a song for the king. The last several episodes have really barreled forward, and I hope that people give this a chance. A lot of people have been saying they're trying it out, they want to check it out, see how it is. Please don't judge the first 2 episodes because those are a little bit like watching those VHS found footage episodes of Dragula season 1. It's not a good parameter for what the rest of the competition was going to look like, because episode 3 all the way till now have all been bangers. And this one was absolutely no exception. We are so close to the finale. And with only 5 episodes for the main part of the competition, it bums me out that we didn't get at least 3 more episodes for this pilot season. I think it would have been nice and beneficial to these kings if we had seen them just a little longer. So if they get renewed for a season 2, I hope to God that they get more episodes. I wasn't sure if they were going to keep it at a top 3 or if they were going to keep it at a top 4 going into the finale, and I was gooped. I was gagged. I was a little gaped at the fact that they turned it into a top 3 and did a second double elimination this season. Not only did that stress me out because my icon and king, Dick Van Dyke, has not won a challenge yet, and I thought that spelled out bad news for him, but I think all of the rest of the room was feeling the pressure too. And also Big D doesn't have a win. So I was a little bit worried about where his story was gonna go to. I felt a little bit of safety for people like Henlo and Molasses, even Perka to some extent, because they did have wins. And I thought that because the competition has been very fair and more focused on the actual competitive side rather than TV, that they might have more of a lock-in to the finale. Dick got a lot of storyline this week. It was a lot about how he wanted to show himself to the judges and not what he thought the judges wanted to see. And I'm glad that after all of these weeks, he's finally decided to just be authentically him. And I think that worked out really well with the fact that this was a performance-based challenge, and that's what he really thrives in. I still think that Dick was top 2 in episode 1. I still think Dick did really good in the horror challenge, and I think Dick did great in the Dong show. So I think the consistency of Dick Van Dyke has been strong all competition. This just happened to be a really good week for him. And based on Big D's huge storyline last week, as well as their storyline this week, I wasn't sure if that would lead to a payout or if it was going to be yet another misdirect. I kind of enjoy so much how the editing style of King of Drag does not prime me to expect what the end result is going to be. If we were to look at something like Drag Race, even Dragula to some extent, the storylines they focus on are on the people who win or go home, so that we're kind of ready for something to happen to them. But King of Drag isn't doing that, and I appreciate that because it leads to a genuine feeling of I'm watching a competition unfold. The theme of this week is music. For the Weenie Challenge, the kings have to create a neck-up look that is inspired by rock and do whatever kind of makeup and hairstyle they want, and they have 1 hour to do that, which is quite a bit of time for a smaller challenge. At first, I didn't understand that this was meant to be a wig challenge. The way that it was initially framed was sort of that it was like they could create a look off of any rock inspiration. And so I was expecting a top-down look, something that even had costuming, which was not the situation. I think it was about midway through that they did a confessional talking about how this was a hair challenge. And then I realized that it was about the wig, not necessarily about anything else. And you know what? I'm not mad they gave them an hour to style a wig, because that can take genuinely days depending on what you are trying to accomplish. As an added layer, which could have been really uncomfortable to watch, they had to mime playing an instrument. I'm glad that the audio team went ham on those SFX because this could have been the most uncomfortable thing, and it probably was really awkward to do in that room in dead silence, knowing that something would happen in post like 8 months later after they had filmed it. This overall was cute. It wasn't too crazy. It wasn't super memorable. My favorite part of it, though, was Perka doing the most iconic line I think that's ever happened in animated television. Is mayonnaise an instrument? It was so absurd. It was so geek culture, layered, nuanced jokes that if you were around for that, you got what Perka was doing. This, I think, is another piece of who Perka is as this nerdy person, in the same way that they did that Steve Urkel Sonic character in the Dong Show. They are thinking about all of these layers of their geek culture and trying to bring that out. And I can see that Perka is really interested in grasping at a very specific audience. And I think that audience is gravitating towards them. So mission accomplished on what they're trying to do. I appreciated the comedy of this specifically, the opening of the mayonnaise jar, putting it on the sandwich, chomping it. At first I thought it was pickles, and I thought, why is pickles this? And then they asked if mayonnaise was an instrument, and then it all clicked. Henlo won the challenge. It genuinely was a pretty cool styled wig, but everybody does get a small cash prize and a bunch of makeup products, which I think was nice that we're in the semifinals, so give them all something for making it this far. It is also worth mentioning that this is the first week in all 5 of them that I actually got ads for this show. And that may not seem like a very significant event, but what I would assume that means is that they're finally getting brands to give them some money to advertise, which is great for King of Drag, but bad for me because I saw that Simply Lemonade commercial back to back at least 12 times. And I think I saw Vitamin Water New York like 22 times in the entire episode. So good for them for getting that ad rev, but also I think I could probably lip sync those commercials now. And the beefy challenge this week is a double patty. They get to rummage through a secondhand store to create a look that can be whatever they want that is for storytelling in a lip sync. I love unconventional material challenges, I love construction challenges, so this made me really happy to see the actual process in which they create their looks. And I think anybody who does drag should be able to either staple something or hot glue something or sew something that is a good representation of who they are. So this was a really fun challenge to watch because we got to see that creative process from start to finish, even giving them a king cam so that we could see what they were doing while they were in the man cave. And the song they had to lip sync to was called Good Boy, which was really fun to see how their interpretation was. Couple big moments here. Big D has never lip sync before. Drag is art, art is subjective, as the Boulets say, and not every drag artist lip syncs. Some drag artists, like Big D, are clowns, and they are out there to entertain and make people laugh. And we see that again and again with what Big D does on the show. But this is kind of a huge moment to have your very first lip sync performance. And I do really appreciate how much the show holds space for the artistry. If this was the MTV show, there would be clunky clown music, making the artist seem stupid, that they've never lip synced before, that this will be their first time. There would be a bunch of confessionals shading them. And overall, the show would try to paint them as some type of Boo Boo the Fool because they're on a performance show and have never performed. And I always hate that mistreatment when that happens on that show. But I love that the room overall was just supportive of Big D's journey and kind of gassing them up like, what if you won? What if you have never done this before and you end up beating all of us who do this on a daily? And I appreciated that they were, again, holding space for Big D and what they do in drag. A lot of these kings were quite cracked at having to sew something. Molasses and Perka seemed the most troubled deep down in their spirits about having to make something. Where Big D was sort of just riding the waves and seeing where it was gonna take them, Molasses and Perka were crumbling. I really do hope that they continue this particular challenge as a legacy challenge, because I think watching them go source whatever materials they want and not really having a limit on that was really great to see, and then watching them create their looks and explain why they got there was also fun. This is a great challenge. This would have been even better for episode 1, but maybe the budget just wouldn't be able to handle that. These last 3 challenges, let's do them again in season 2. So let's get into these looks and the performances. Molasses looked actually very cool. I loved the play on gender expression, on childhood. I like blending both of these concepts of what is considered masculine and what is considered feminine, and finding this intersection of both of those where they meet and how to present that as this non-binary entity. I do think that it was a little too conceptual and maybe not the best use of time construction-wise. There was a lot of volume in this outfit, but maybe I think it was maxed a little too much. It's always good to go big, but sometimes you can go too far and have to be reeled back in. And I think that's where this was. The performance lost me a bit as well. I think Molasses has this problem where they think about being outside the box and high concept. And sometimes that works out really well, like in the first 2 challenges, but then other times that outside of the box thinking strays too far away from the source material. And I love the way that their brain works. I just think that this was the wrong week to stray from a constructed look for a performance to a song called Good Boy. Look-wise, it was kind of in the middle of the pack for me. And performance-wise, it honestly was my least favorite. And so overall, I understood why Molasses was bottom 3 this week. Henlo is next and is doing true creature drag, which I loved and I responded super positively to. We kind of saw a little bit of this creature drag during the Prom King episode, but it was definitely scaled back a little more and was more of an art piece installation rather than a creature, where this truly was. I loved this almost carnivorous plant look, the way that it had been detailed and maybe spray painted to create all the different effects. I loved the beading personally because it kind of looked like veins almost. The construction was immaculate, in my opinion, from what we could see. And it's impressive that Henlo was able to make this in literally 24 hours because it looked like it was packed. And I think that speaks to Henlo's ability to synthesize a look from their own creation, where I've complained numerous times in the MTV show, contestants come in and they have an idea of what their drag looks like and they have an idea of how to present that, but then when it comes time to actually put their hands on fabric and manipulate that into a shape, they're unable to translate their aesthetic through their own fingertips. And I think for drag, that is kind of a problem. You should be able to do anything on your own. I do think that maybe this costume was not the most conducive to movement, because when it came time to perform, I do think that Henlo was just a little restrained, maybe had a hard time moving around. But also if we look at the theory of who Henlo is, that they're this creature who doesn't really understand how Earth works and how humans work, they just sort of bop around and have a good time, it allows for a little bit of straying outside of technically perfect performance, because the goal is to be silly and kind of goofy, right? And so I think for who Henlo is trying to be, they reached that mark. For what the challenge wanted Henlo to be, it just missed out a smidge on the performance part, but the look-wise was easily the best of the entire night. Dick was out next doing a religious motif. This slutty pope with the assless chaps and the chest and the waist being visible was really kind of hot in an odd way. And I've seen so many slutty popes before, but none of them have really made me go, ooh, this one did. And even though there wasn't a ton going on design-wise, I truly wasn't mad about it, because what was made was constructed quite well. The colors were pleasing, the lines were clean, and it's kind of the drag that I expect from a drag king. Playing on the sluttiness, himbo drag kind of. Wearing a, harness or something, really tight pants with a huge packer, something along those lines. And so this really hit all the marks for what I expect from a drag king. And also, those chaps were really well constructed. Anything that is pant-like is hard to tailor and fit well and make look like you didn't just sew it the day before, and I think the construction was quite impressive. And because this challenge was half design, half performance, where Dick maybe didn't go all the way in on the design portion, he went full throttle into the performance aspect. His body movements, his hip sways, the thrusts got me in my feelings, And I've said it before and I'll say it again, I have such a huge crush on Dick Van Dyke in drag. He took that stage, made it his bitch, in a way that the others just did not. Dick was my winner of the challenge, and that isn't just because I'm being a simp. It's because I genuinely think that he did the best across the board. Perka is next out, and look-wise, I was a tad disappointed. I think they could have done a lot more with the look. And it was just overall a little too simple across the board. All of my notes kept repeating the exact same thing. The makeup was so good. And I think this look overall did not keep up with the incredible artistry that Perka put into the face. That face card is not going to decline, but that costume card will. The judges were not feeling the performance, but from my little seat here in front of my computer, I really was living. I thought where Dick Van Dyke carried the stage and really made that performance his own, I thought Perka did very similarly and embodied what I think the song wanted to see. I think Perka really went for it, and I enjoyed Perka's performance. Probably the second best next to DVD. I would legitimately go watch Perka Sex if they were in any of the local bars in my area, and I would go to watch them perform and to make sure they got tipped, because I think that they might be one of the most dynamic performers of this entire group. Perka had me really in the palm of his hand, and I was impressed, even if the judges weren't. For me, Perka was maybe in the high-low section of the bottoms, but then we get to the final thrust and things are a little bit different. We'll get there in a moment. Big D is last, and I loved what this wanted to be. Big D made me laugh, and I think that can make up for a lot of points where things may technically be lacking. I appreciate this thing that Big D does where they're sort of like herpaderp about their drag. He doesn't take things seriously, he's just there to have a good time. The dedication to the challenge was a little lacking, and the focus and direction was a little lacking. And this was technically their first lip sync performance ever, and I think that was quite evident. It was sort of like watching a baby deer try to walk for the first time. It was awkward, it didn't really go anywhere, but it was trying really hard, and for that it gets points. And I laughed. I laughed a lot because of the performance being so silly and goofy and leaning in on all of these things that makes Big D who they are. The judges' critiques were kind of all over the place, and I am so bummed that Sasha is not here for the semifinal and the final. I wish that we could have gotten to see her for these last two episodes, but I understand she's got other commitments. Hopefully they can nab her for the entire second season if they get one, because I think she brings a level of intelligence, a level of sophistication and polish to these critiques, and comes in with a really fair lens on how everyone is judged. Dick Van Dyke wins this challenge, and I screamed yes at my computer because I was so excited. I'm happy that he finally got a win and is in fact going to the finale. Henlo is then called second as the Kings moving on into the finale, and I was also very happy about this. He's had this upward trajectory since week 1, and I'm glad that that translated into a safe position. And the final thrust is an interpretive dance. I don't want to talk about these too long because there wasn't really a lot to say. Perka's dance confused me a bit. I didn't quite understand the story. There were moments where I thought I did, and then I got confused again on where it was going and what it was trying to accomplish. Big D once again made me laugh, but this time I couldn't tell if it was for the wrong reason or the right reason. And then Molasses came out and had me. Molasses started out in that tailored suit and that cowboy hat, and I was just eating off the palm of their hand, honestly. They move with such fluidity and heart and soul, and I was so drawn into that performance. Molasses does this thing to a room where they sort of reset the energy and set this tone, and I think the judges picked up on that, and that carried through the camera as well. And Molasses is in fact called as the winner of the final thrust, no questions asked. I was very sad to see Perka and Big D eliminated right before the finale. It's always hard and always difficult to see that happen, but mathematically it was bound to happen eventually that two people would also have to go home if they wanted this to be a top 3. Both of them did have such good runs, and I hope they're proud of the work that they did individually here, because I think they should be. I cackled at Perka plugging how to book them if you liked their run on the show. And I appreciated Big D's speech about feeling love and acceptance from everybody in the cast and the crew. So track record wise, going into the finale, let's take a peek at these really quick. Dick Van Dyke has 1 win, no bottom placements, and a single high position. That, in my opinion, puts them kind of at the top of the scoreboard. Henlo also has 1 win, has a single high placement, and has 1 bottom position. That puts them right in the middle for me on my scoreboard. And the lowest score, in my opinion, is Molasses, who has 2 wins at the beginning, 1 high position in the middle, and then 2 bottom placements. This scoreboard is a little bit interesting because Molasses has this kind of downward roller coaster trajectory where Henlo has the climb. And then DVD is sort of just coasting at the top. And I don't think coasting at the top is a bad thing if you're doing good. In my opinion, I do think that Henlo is the strongest winner trajectory because they started at the bottom and then worked their way up. And Molasses stood out when there were a lot of people to compete for attention, but then when it started getting into a smaller cast, they stopped standing out positively and more for negative reasons. And I do worry that that could not lead to a win, but who knows, because Lawrence Chaney won UK2 with the exact same trajectory, starting out really good and then kind of colliding with the ground at the end of the competition, and Bimini started at the bottom and worked their way all the way to the top and still didn't win. So it could go any different way with this finale, depending on what they asked them to do. I'm rooting for all of them individually because I do like every one of them, and I think no matter who wins, it's going to be hard because I'm going to be sad that someone else lost. But currently, just based off the way the judges pick apart their performances and analyze them, I think the strongest 2 for the win are either Dick Van Dyke or Henlo. Who are you rooting for? I'm so excited and nervous for this finale next week, but check in next week and I will do one last recap of this incredible show. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and if you would like to check out some of my Drag Race videos, if you are a fan of Drag Race, you can find those all on this page. And if you are not an Extravaganza Extra member, you can check that out right by the subscribe button, and that will allow you to watch some of my posted videos a few days earlier than everyone else. Thank you for watching, and I will see y'all on the flip.